Get ready, set, go.
It was recording itself the whole
Hi,
time.
Hannah.
That would be funny.
That would be awful.
There's no sound.
It's like a nose coming from
It's
the
a
side.
picture. We realized halfway through we have to start over.
He just took a picture.
Why?
Okay, so we're in the middle of the series talking about mental health. Last week we started off looking at Zacchaeus, and we talked about idea of not fitting in and those types of things, and how Jesus meets us where we are, and there's a call for us to be that for each other. That community means inclusion and taking care of each other and knowing each other's business, right? In a good way. We ended with some myths and some facts about mental health, and wanted to just kind of set the stage for us to understand. That's going to be a nice sound on the video. Set the stage for us to understand that this really is a serious issue that we are talking about, that we're dealing with, and just remembering that 1 in 4 people will experience some kind of mental health problem in their life, and 1 in 10 of you are already experiencing something at your young age. Those numbers are daunting to me, and that means we have to talk about that. So as Christians, we are motivated to care not just for those who are suffering from some kind of mental illness or dealing with some kind of mental health issue, but to see unity in our body as a whole. And so one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about as we talk about mental health is continuing to talk about unity, continuing to talk about what really makes God's church unique and different from other types of organizations that you could belong to. And I really believe that Christian unity is something that in practice, when it's done correctly, the way that Jesus wants us to do it, there is nothing like it. And I say that as somebody who's been a member of clubs and fraternities and other social groups in the past, but there's something about being a part of God's community that is different. And I want that to be a challenge for us as we continue these talks, to think about how are we different as the HYG? How are we unique? How are we something that people want to be a part of? That each of you in this room need to be a part of, because every other person in this room knows you well, knows you well enough to know when you're hurting, and knows you well enough to know that they can be there for you when you are hurting. So unity is going to be important. 1 Corinthians 12:26, Paul says this: if one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. So we've asked this before, but I want to ask it again, because I think it really goes to this idea of how we don't necessarily take Paul up on those words of when one of us suffers or when one of us is hurting, we're all hurting. So I'm going to ask this question again. Just throw out answers that you've already said, or throw out answers that maybe are coming to your head now. What do you think people mean when they talk about the stigma of mental health?
The reputation is sorted to it.
Okay, and what is that reputation?
That it's a bad thing, and it's really dangerous.
Okay, so having mental health issues can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? We equate things like stress, depression, and anxiety with you're just wacko, right? You're just crazy. What else? You okay, buddy?
I know. What's happening?
I'm drinking too much hot chocolate to go at a short time. I'm drinking too much hot chocolate.
Well, slow it down a little bit. Slow it down a little bit.
He's panicking.
Back here. What do I mean by that question? Well, I'm wanting to know what you think people mean when they say there's a stigma around talking about mental health. You know what stigma means?
It's not a word.
It's like there's a negative meaning that people give to the idea of mental health. And so why do you think there is that? Why do you think there is that negative meaning? And why do you think what do you think people mean when they say that it's a negative to talk about this stuff?
One thing I think is because it's basically, I know this kind of sounds absurd, but it's like you admitting your life's not perfect, if that makes any sense. But like, it's just like, everyone's dream is to live this like perfect life. But when these things get in the way, I mean, it's their real things. So I mean,
Yeah.
it makes you feel alone, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's extremely awkward to talk about, especially if you don't do it with the right people. And you're afraid that they'll turn away or think of you differently. And if they do, that makes it even worse and might influence you to do something. But if you're gonna talk about it, make sure it's the people that you know that know you for you and don't care what you say.
I think there is a stigma because we know from history that people who have mental issues or unexplained issues of any kind have been treated poorly as a whole. We know that that's the case. And so now we've got that. If I admit that I have some kind of issue, people might assume certain things about me, negative things about me. So maybe I don't want to admit that problem because I don't want people to feel badly about me.
Yeah.
Or it
Very
makes
personal. Good.
it makes a lot of people uncomfortable when you talk about it. Like I take medication. I get very bad depressive episodes, and so I take medication so I don't get those. But there are not a lot of people that I could tell that to without them immediately being like, well, okay, that's your life. Like, it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or they think like, well, why can't you be happy?
Right.
Why do you need a bill?
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because what we tend to see a lot in Christian circles is this idea of, well, the fruit of the Spirit are things like love and joy and peace. So, if you're really in Jesus, how can you be depressed?
Or why can't you pray it away?
Yeah.
Why do you have to have something?
How is that harmful? Like, speak personally. How is that harmful?
Well, because I've struggled with that exact thing. I have been told that it's not godly to take medication, but I think like he gave me those struggles and he gave me the tools that I needed, and one of those tools just happened to be taking a medication every morning. Like, that's how he was able to let me accomplish that.
I feel like if you're going just like, why do you take medication to cure your sadness or depression, that makes them think that they need to just stop because they can just try and be happy themselves without the medication, and it could possibly get worse.
I think we get really quick to equate things like this with we almost maybe we don't say they're equal, but we almost turn these types of things into sin-like characteristics, right? Because I attempted suicide, I'm a sinner. Because I deal with anger issues stemming from some things that happened in my childhood, I'm a sinner. Because I didn't handle things great when I found out that my son had a disability, I'm a sinner. Instead of, how is God using who he made me to be and these different events or parts of me to draw me closer to him, to draw me closer to you. And the older I get, and I know I sound like, back in my day guy right now, but the older I get, the less I care about those who will stigmatize these things. And I hope you understand what I mean. It's not that I don't care about them, I love them, but I just don't care what they have to say. The older I get, the more I want to talk about this stuff. I want to be real with you guys. When I was a 22-year-old youth minister, brand new into the youth ministry world, I didn't talk about this stuff with my teenagers because I was uncomfortable. And it was crazy that I was uncomfortable because I was in the middle of my own mental health problems, right? But I was uncomfortable in sharing any of that with teens. And they were dealing with things they really needed somebody who would talk to them about. They needed somebody who could normalize their own voice and their own confusion. And so I don't care about those who want to stigmatize it anymore. I don't care about what they have to say. I think we need to have a voice that talks about these things and that lets people know, because I am diagnosed with something, or because I am depressed, or because I get anxious, or fill in the blank, does not equate that I am a sinner. It doesn't mean I need Jesus. So does the person sitting next to me who doesn't deal with those issues, right? So we're all in this together. I don't believe that being a Christian makes us immune to mental health problems. I think there's all kinds of things that cause mental health issues. I think when we look at each other's lives in detail, we begin to see that people who are dealing with these things don't wake up one morning and say, hey, you know what would be really cool? I'd like to start having major depressive episodes. That would be rocking, right? I totally want to do that. Or
that's what I did.
Yeah. That's not what happens. There's a lot of different concepts. There's a lot of paths that we take to good mental health, and there's a lot of paths that are taken to not so good mental health. And some of those are in our control, and some of those things are not in our control. So I shared with you the start of my own issue last week, my own journey. It was not my junior year of high school when I attempted suicide. It was when I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old. I was walking right beside my dad on the way to a Cub Scout event, as close to my dad as I am to Troy right now. I turned my head 1 minute, and when I turned back, he was not there. He had gotten hit by a car from behind, broke all 3 bones, broke the 2 bones in his lower leg and his femur in his upper leg, wrapped his kneecap completely around his leg, and flipped up over the car, thankfully, and didn't go under it. The last thing I remember are the taillights flashing and my dad rolling off the top of the car. Because his leg had broken in so many places, he grabbed his knee. And so when he landed on his head, and he wasn't able to brace himself because he was grabbing his leg in pain. And so he landed on his head. And I saw that at 8 years old, right? And I had that dream. I relived it every night from the point we left the house to the brake lights. Every night for at least a couple of years. And I would wake up screaming and crying. And it hurt. We didn't do a lot of talking about stuff like that in the 1980s. And you would think that that would be where the, you would think we would do that. And while we didn't do a lot of talking, we did have a church counselor at our church that we were going to in Denver. And so my parents took me to see that counselor. And you would think that that would be where I would get the help I needed to process what was going on. But actually, I was re-traumatized in my counseling sessions. I was actually victimized in my counseling session. And kept that inside of me for nearly 30 years before it came out in therapy. And I let people in my inner circle know. And that's what happened. For the rest of my adolescence, the rest of my childhood and my adolescence and my early adulthood, kept my mouth closed and I didn't mention any of it. I didn't say anything about any of it. I kept it all inside. I told my parents I'm fine, and every night I had that dream. And every night I would wake up in a sweat because all I would see are the brake lights. And every night I would relive other parts of that trauma until Josiah came along. And I'll talk more about those episodes later, but that really is what got me on the right path. Even after studying this stuff, after being in youth ministry for 15 years, after having a PhD in this stuff, it still took another major life event for me to start getting the help that I needed. Yes?
Was your dad okay?
My dad is okay. In fact, you can see him on Sunday mornings at church with us. They retired down here this summer, and he lives here. It was a pretty cool story. A story that I appreciate even more now. We were told he was going to be in a coma. We told he was in a coma. We were told he wasn't going to come out of the coma, and that if he did come out of the coma because of the way that he landed on his head, that he would probably have severe brain damage and he would never be the person that we knew before. And he came out of the coma and he did not have brain damage. And, well, he did not have diagnosed brain damage. My sister and I question every once in a while. But you have to know him. It was awesome. And I had a dad I've had a dad my whole life. He's been here. And so that's really cool. And that's a positive part of the story. And that's something that's going to come into play later too, with when Josiah gets here. So thank you for asking that. I should have said that. And that's not it. He's the bald guy that I kind of look like that sits next to us on Sunday mornings. Okay. So what time is it?
7:40.
Okay. Time for you to talk for a little bit. How can we, as the HYG, remove some of the stigma of mental health for our group? What are some real things that we can do as a youth group to remove this stigma?
We can listen, not hear, and not judge if someone's going through something.
I like that. Listen, not just hear, and not judge people.
Just continue to grow closer.
Yeah. How though? Like, what does that mean?
I'd appreciate it if other people also talked, because right now it's just me going, I take meds, I have depression, I have trauma. So, yeah. Humor's my coping mechanism. Anyways.
Mine
Oh.
and sarcasm. I would have never guessed. What else? I mean, Liz right. Really talking about things. That's a way that you grow closer, right? What else?
You just try basically what Layla said, just try and be more social about your problems and just listen to people's problems.
How many of you are perfect?
Me.
I mean, yeah.
I'm
Right?
amazing.
That would have been my guess. None of us are perfect, and we all know that, right? None of us are perfect. We all know that. So we gotta talk about that. And I don't mean we're not perfect in the sense of I mess up from time to time. We're not talking about my mess ups. We're not talking about when I sin. When I do something I'm not supposed to, right? I mean, I got stories like that all the time. I know I'm not perfect in that sense, right? I learned that when Lydia was like 2 or 3 years old and yelled out from the back seat on the turnpike when somebody cut us off, "You moron!" And I was like, "Oh, where'd she learn that from?" And Lisa was just eyeballing me. And, this is all your fault, right? Like, that's part of Christian unity, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we're not perfect in that every single one of us has, at the very least, days when we're just not feeling it, right? And 1 in 4 of us are probably going to be dealing with something a lot greater than just days. So let's talk about it.
So something we can do is protect our time together on Wednesdays, make sure we're coming, and then also make sure we get our games done like we did, so that we have this time, but also so we can have prayer time, and you could say, hey, this is what I'm struggling this week, and we can really use some prayers. And
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love that because while I don't believe you can just pray something away, like, one of the reasons that I dealt with some mental health types of things when Josiah came along was because people were literally telling us while we were pregnant with him, well, you just pray. Like, we got our diagnosis. Your child has Down syndrome. There's no denying it. We've got we did a DNA test. Like, there's an extra chromosome there. And it's not Lisa's, so it's got to be the baby's, right? There was no, well, just pray and he'll come out. He'll come out normal. That's what we were told. If you pray, he'll come out normal. Oh, that was infuriating, right? And people say the same thing about mental health type of issues. Well, if you just pray more, you'll be fine. And while I don't believe that's how prayer works, I do believe that prayer is powerful. And I believe that prayer can help us. Layla said this well a minute ago, and I'm not going to say it exactly how she said it, but trying to get the idea of that. I think that praying through these things helps us to navigate what God has allowed to be put in our lives already to draw us closer to Him. Does that make sense? So I'm all about that. All right, how can we value people, especially people who may feel like they don't fit in? When I say we, I'm talking about the HYG. How can the HYG value people, especially people who feel like they don't fit in?
They can show them that not everyone's the same, and that you don't have to be like everyone else to fit in. You just get to be yourself and you'll be loved.
Yeah, just be yourself, and let's like that. Right? What else? Real tangible things we can do to value people.
Just show them they're welcome.
Yeah.
No
How?
matter what.
Include them in everything.
Yeah, be inclusive.
Don't.
Actually tell them, like, Noah, I value you.
Same here, Bobby. I value you.
Go closer to them.
Yeah. Like, share that with them, right? Like, I don't know, how many of you heard this a little bit ago? Because she was trying to talk over people? But I heard it. Mainly because I was watching her, because I was sussing on her, but. Did you hear Lucy talk about us? She said we were nice.
I heard it.
Do you know, like, one, I love it. I love that you are here and came back. That's awesome. But two, like, sometimes we do mess up in this area. And so for you to say that we're nice people, that made me kind of smile. I was like, okay, that's something to build on. So thank you for saying that.
I don't care if you guys mess up. I like love this youth group.
Awesome. Well, we love you. So thank you for being here.
We'll learn we have a lot of tough love, like we all give each other a lot of hard times. Like me and Layla, we hate on each other all the time.
Oh,
That was my friend, so I like.
Yeah.
If you
So
didn't
that's
know us,
really-
you think we genuinely hated each other.
I think too, we also have to recognize some of those individual character traits. Like I've taught, like I'm sarcastic, right? And sometimes I have to remember that my sarcasm, I take it one way and other people might take it another way. And so I have to be sensitive to that, right? And so we have to, but you know that when you actually know each other, right? When you're actually close, right? Does that make sense? Okay. I want us to I want to do this. Everybody close your eyes. We're not playing Mafia. Just close your eyes.
Someone's gonna
Except
die.
for you.
Sorry.
Someone's dying in Finland this time.
Close your eyes. I want you to think of that time where you felt left out, wherever it was. Where you felt left out, where you felt stigmatized, judged, different for whatever reason. In your mind, I want you to picture it vividly. What's going on? Get that scene in your head. What's going on? Now I want you to start just calling out words, answering the question, how do you feel in that moment?
Upset. Alone. Look at third wheel. Completely wrong.
Embarrassed.
Unwanted.
Different.
Left out.
Depressed. Now, I want you to clear your mind of that scene. And I want you to think of a time when you felt valued. Get that picture in your mind. You feel valued. You are a part. You feel loved. You are with community. Same thing. What's going on in there? Think about it. Get it pictured in your mind. And now start calling out words answering that same question. How do you feel in that moment?
Overjoyed.
Respected.
Included. Enough. Loved. Happy. Important. Like I belong. Appreciated.
Included.
Seen.
Special.
Needed.
Loud.
Known.
Yes. Now one last time I want you to clear your mind. And I want you to think of someone else. I want you to put in your mind a picture of someone else that you know that may be struggling to feel valued and included in this group. Get that person in your mind. Get that picture in your mind. What might that look like? And rather than answer how you feel in that moment or how they feel in that moment, I want you to throw out words to answer this question. How do you think that Jesus feels about them in that moment?
He loves them.
Love.
Probably hurting for them.
He's still there with them.
Knows they're perfect.
Wants them.
Wanting to help.
Now think about what you can do. Think about what you can do to make the difference in that person's life. To connect how you have felt when you were alone to how Jesus is feeling about them in that moment. And let's close with this prayer. Lord of the excluded, open my eyes to those I would prefer not to see. Open my life to those I would prefer not to know. Open my heart to those I would prefer not to love. And so open my eyes to see where I exclude you. Amen. All right. What time is it?
7:54.
Good, we've got time. What's going on in your life? Let's, we're gonna do some of this prayer requesting. Prayer time. You can stop the video now. Everyone say bye to Hannah.
Bye, Hannah.
Bye.